Good morning again, everybody. Good morning. Lord, we're gonna go and get started. This is before we get going up to Todd Reed right here has, this is a sheet we've used several weeks in the past too. It's the same sheet we're gonna be watching today, and this will be kind of be the format for a discussion. If you don't have a sheet, follow it out and we'll make sure that you get one. So what we're gonna be doing today, again, is here in just a few minutes, we're gonna be watching a clip and walking through the sheet that Todd is in, just to kind of discuss some of the various features of, again, the idea of how this work is presented, some of the context and strategies that are used in terms of the ways that they're presenting the information. And again, in the idea of some of the principles we talked about how this is helpful for what we need to know as Christians in our walk of life and evangelism and sharing Jesus with others, things along those lines. And ultimately then transition to faith discourse and what ways that information in our media as we're consuming it as disciples of Christ, information presented in ways that tell stories different than what we know about who God has made us to be, and ultimately how those are calling upon us or drawing upon us to do things different than what He's commanded us to do in our commandments, His 10 commandments. So that's kind of an overview of the day again. We're going to get to the clip here in just a moment, but I want to give at least a little bit of a front porch for the clip today that we're going to watch. I've been saving this one for a few weeks kind of intentionally because I think it's going to be, it may be one of the harder ones to watch. And I think it's harder just because of the way our world is. I'm actually going to have us talk about politics, believe it or not. I was joking about this. I was joking. Yeah, all in one on Sunday morning here in Bible. So the clip's gonna be just, and when I say politics, it's really about the divisiveness that we see in terms of us against them, those kinds of ideas between Republicans and Democrats. I put the rules up again, this idea that this really isn't about us trying to figure out whether, Republicans are great, the Democrats are evil, or vice versa, or anything like that, or even to really drill in as much about what we think about each party and what we think about those different types of things. But again, the rule of the idea is that, really focusing on how things get presented. Not so much necessarily the content itself. We're going to talk about the content a little bit today, maybe that happens, but really thinking about how it's presented and how it's then helpful for us or not in our walks with Jesus, in terms of what we need to know and how that might inform the people that we can then talk to Jesus about, and gaining a perspective of where they might be at because they may have watched something very similar or even the same clip, or the same types of things that we see politics portrayed in our media. So that's kind of a little bit of front porch. Before I play it too, I had the thought of for each of us just to kind of think through of, we've got this question up here: what makes a good journalism? I heard someone say truth, but Carol said truth. And so principal ideas for what good journalism looks like. And I thought maybe it'd be helpful for us to say some of these things out loud, even before we watch the clip, to kind of really think through of what our expectations are about how news and information should get presented to give us an accurate idea of what's going on, different kinds of things that get Lori around.
There's no, you cannot get any idea of what their opinion is.
Yep.
It's not an op-ed.
So Lori said unbiased reporting, and maybe even, I like what you said there next too, of you can't really get an idea of what their opinion is. It's kind of the dragnet, just the facts man, here's the facts, you might say, here's what this person said about this, here's what this person said about this, but we're not really saying that one is necessarily inherently wrong or right or anything like that. Carrie, you said truth. Did you want to say more about that or put you on the spot? Yeah.
And unbiased.
Absolutely. And I think for in my mind, Carol, when I think about truth, it's also things that you can demonstrably show to people. There's a lot of things that for us in the world, things might feel true or things might seem true in the ways that our perceptions about whatever it is that we know. This might seem true, but then the evidence actually, if you lay it out, might be something that's close to what you think or completely different than what you think. Lori, yeah.
I think less journalism and more opinion pieces than anything anymore. I don't
Yeah.
think there is real journalism in our stories anymore.
So Lori's saying again, we're seeing a lot more opinion pieces than we are really journalism or news stories. In my mind, this could be a quick digression, I hope, but it makes me think about, 110 years ago, and you think about yellow journalism and some of the things that was going on between Hearst and Pulitzer and the ways that, and how sort of what Pulitzer did, and now there's a prize named after him, that some of the principles for objective journalism came out of some of the strong things that they did for a while ago. And the whole idea that in objective journalism, part of what they try to do is always present two sides. Sometimes there are two sides, but that is one aspect that you see. One that, and maybe something that hasn't said this yet, but one that really bugs me, or that I wish that we'd see more, is actually making sure you source your material. We talked about this one of the earlier weeks, that some people say, or they, the ways the pronouns get used, and they don't actually attribute it to, it was this person that said it, or this person that said it. I don't want to say too much about the clip, but there's moments in the clip where they're playing things that people said, but they don't actually give an idea of who they are. Anyway, it's an aspect of something that we see there. Any other thoughts about this idea of what makes good journalism as we think through this about before we get ready to watch the clip here? So what we're looking for is truth. Oh, I'm sorry, Tiffany.
I feel like not serving a personal purpose or not trying to serve an agenda.
Not serving a personal purpose, not serving an agenda, yes.
Like some of the news that's happening like in Russia is like serving a purpose. There's not a lot of outer perspective.
So Tiffany just mentioned talking with Ed a little bit about, what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, characterize a little bit, but it's just the idea that certainly there's going to be news sources maybe in Russia that are characterizing certain things to serve the purpose of what they want to do, why they're justifying the war and different stuff like that. So obviously, things that we might see about it might be completely different. The other thing I'm going to add to serving the purpose, when we go back to the very first couple of weeks and we talked about some of those principles, we talked about the whole propaganda model, which is Noam Chomsky, sociological, linguistic stuff, that's really heady kind of stuff. But a couple of things that he talks about is remembering that these, whatever news, if you're talking especially cable news, not NBC, and anyway, cable news especially, these are corporations that are driven to make money. And so part of the purpose that's there, the agenda that's there, is to drive you to advertising. And anyway, I think I said enough. Any other thoughts, comments about good journalism here before we watch the clip? All right. I gotta switch some things around here. Give me just a second. All right, here we go.
I'm Laura Ingram, this is Andrew Mangle from Washington tonight. Thanks for being with us. The real terrorists, that's the focus of tonight's angle. Right, the Democrats had their narrative set long before Biden was sworn into office. They were telling a story about how Americans would thrive, would be safe and happy under Biden's policies. Now, because their climate change obsession would deeply damage American families. They always knew that. Therefore, as kind of a preemptive measure, they decided to argue the negative, that electing Republicans in the future would be akin to electing terrorists who would seek to blow up our entire system.
This is just an extraordinarily dangerous course for Republicans to be taking in terms of our democracy.
The Republican Party can no longer say that they don't agree with the insurrectionists, with the bigots, with the racists.
There may now be people aligning with white supremacists who are in Congress. How do you protect the country from them?
It could be that we have a Republican majority in Congress this fall, and if that happens, you may see Republicans in Congress wanting to cut the money to the Department of Justice, turn the lights out. We may lose our democracy.
All right. Everybody got it? Did you see it again? What I think I'm gonna do is, let's take like 5-6 minutes at your tables, give you a little bit of time to discuss sort of, discuss it, just sort of what you saw, you know, in terms of some of the things we just talked about, good journalism, in what ways this does present that or doesn't, however you see it. And then also the handout sheet, to at least start discussing some of the ideas of the strategies that get used and how this information was presented. Again, I'll give you 5-6 minutes to discuss, and then we'll come all back together. Give the same picture. you not like your phone? All right, we can go ahead and pull everybody back together and see kind of what, discussions we had at the table here about the split. See what kind of things, you want to draw on or focus on or draw attention to. Again, to start, just to kind of tee it up, if the board wants to go first, but, you know, anything about, you know, we talked a little bit about objective journalism, aspects about that you want to draw attention to. On the sheet at the top, you've got, you know, the principal pieces about what you need to know, algorithms, paper, propaganda model, anything along those lines, maybe we'll start there, and then kind of start walking through the principle a bit when we get into context and strategy. Any comments, thoughts about anybody? Fred, yeah.
Growing up, when I was young in the '70s, we had this thing called air pollution. We didn't do something about it, we could be dead 10 years. In the '80s, it was acid rain. All life is gonna be gone.
Yeah.
In the '90s, we had the ozone. All life is gonna be destroyed by the ozone repairs and stuff. In the '10s, it's global warming. And, you know, the agenda, and now we're looking into electric, or, you know, climate change or whatever. I'm of the personal opinion that, God's gonna run this thing, and no matter what man does, God is in control.
So everybody can hear Fred, but just kind of. Fred's talking about the fact of just even going over decades of time, how many different instances that we've got. You know, the sky is falling type of scenarios that get presented to us, you know, he mentioned, you know, the idea of smog and air pollution in the '70s, and the idea of, acid rain in the '80s, you mentioned, ozone layer in the '90s, and then even now, when we're talking climate change, global warming, the different boogeymen sort of that we're afraid of, that the earth isn't gonna be able to sustain it anymore, and Fred made the point of how much he can trust that God can hold all together, and that God is the one that's in control of how the earth is gonna function in his time. Lord says it is gonna go on. Yes. In his time, when the hour that he already has set. Other comments about the clip? Kristen?
Her objective is to expose what everybody else is trying to do to you, and yet that's exactly what she's doing. She's trying to expose what all those people's meta narrative is, so you're aware of it. And yet at the same time, she's doing the exact same thing as what they are, only on the other side.
Yeah. Making the accusation that being manipulated by the mass media. Being manipulated, all these people that find the truth. Well, the obvious thing that maybe in a way also might be manipulating you to trust what she's saying. No.
That flip, I don't see nothing new from it. So it's very smooth thing.
Yeah.
There's no rules there, all the issues. And, yeah, you know, it's not new for what categories in the boxes, the right wing, and seeing it as the left wing.
Yes. So yeah, if everybody could hear Bon's making the point about the title of the she presented her ideas, not objective journalism, he said, and Fox is going to be presenting much more of a conservative opinion than CNN or MSNBC would. Harlan, yeah. Absolutely. Harlan made the point that they throw so much stuff at you so quickly, it's hard to determine what's the real truth. I was talking about strategy in a second, but to add to that, Harlan, you know, one of the things that in my mind as I watch it, that I think is interesting is how quickly the transition takes place. And you start from the aspect of the real terrorists, tonight on the Laura Ingram. And then the first word out of her mouth after that pause is Democrat. So it's like in your brain making this connection that Democrats are the real terrorists. And then you have the series of three kind of clips that she says demonstrate how Democrats are actually also calling Republican terrorists. But she doesn't tell you who they are, doesn't give you context about why the people are saying the things they're saying, and maybe they're true, maybe they're not, I don't know. It's just this quick rapid fire of democracy might be over, the last thing, or democracy might die, whatever the last thing the guy says. Tiffany,
But like they use like emotionally triggering words, like I think a lot of the US since 9/11 has been really sensitive to the word like terrorist. And so like using those words, it's not, I mean, it's to scare people, it's to like divide or like get people like heated and stuff like that. It just gets your emotions flying. So it's more like emotional and.
yeah,
like
Tiffany's
triggering.
making the comment just about how much it's interacting with your emotions. You're gonna have an emotional reaction to it from the standpoint of Rick, I'll talk in a second, but and maybe you hear the thing about terrorists and you hear Democrats like, well, yeah, I totally like them. Maybe that's your emotional reaction, like, we gotta get those Democrats. Or maybe your reaction is you hear that, you're like, well, you know, and then you're mad because you don't like it. Either you're mad because you like what you said, or you're mad because you don't like it. It's gonna ratchet you up. Rick,
How they demonize the other side for using this tactic. But then it's okay for me to use that same tactic that I'm demonizing the other side for you.
did everybody hear that? It's demonizing the other side for using these horrible tactics, but at the same time, I'll, in the same breath, use these tactics to demonize the other side. Well, you know, we're not very good people sometimes, so. So let's talk about that a little bit. Just on the sheet, there's the basic media analysis top header. And I really want to focus on the idea of strategy with this one. And if you remember several weeks ago, we talked about this more with, you know, the truck commercial and the Volvo commercial and the ways that information is getting sold to you. You know, again, thinking about this as a product that's getting sold to you about why you should buy into this. When you watch a clip like this, that's, you know, opinion piece on a news channel, you know, whatever you want to characterize it as, but what kind of strategies do you think they're using here to get you to, and really ultimately, I've got the propaganda model thing up, but the idea is to get you engaged and keep watching the commercial. What strategy, the three strategies again are logic, you know, information that you can present, character in terms of credible sources that you can use to demonstrate why this might be true, and then emotion. What's everybody's thoughts about the strategies that get used to for this flip? A lot of emotions.
It's like a dopamine hit, and they just want to fire the sessions, you know, these guys, I agree with that. God, it feels so good, because these guys are bad, I'm bad, you know, and then, okay, I'll watch them tomorrow, and I'll watch them the next day, you know, the whole thing is to get you in front of the TV to watch that, you know, consume that media, so if they keep watching it, it's like an addiction.
Yeah. So like everybody can hear, it's just use the word, it's like a dopamine hit. You just get flooded with this especially if you're watching this and you agree with some of the things that you're saying, it's just to make you feel better about who you are, feel better about where you're at, but then the drive then to say, well, I want to watch that again next time because I want to feel better about whatever it is. Or even the sense of that if you watch it, you don't like what you're saying, however that ratchets you up. You know, maybe it ratchets up the stress, maybe it ratchets up frustration and other kinds of emotions you might have, but then again, it's still driving you to say, well, I wonder what they're gonna say next. But the outrageous thing is, and it's this weird kind of almost compulsion that we might have to continue to consume this because of the way it's presented. Other thoughts about strategy? Yeah, Jude. Yes.
So if you really want to get the true, whatever they're saying, the truth behind it.
Yeah. Judy's making the point of looking especially at the clips, but even the clips of the three different people they have, you know, just kind of describing some of how Democrats have been calling Republicans terrorists, exactly how we characterize it. But then, I mean, there is information. those people presenting information, it's just Judith making the point that they're small clips, you don't really get the full context of what they're saying, I think the one person saying something about, that there may be white supremacists, there may be this in Congress right now, and it's like, well, that might be. Maybe yes, we're kind of, there have been for years, and likely have been, maybe even more, 150 years ago than there are now. And, but looking at that example of, what's the context of why that person is saying that? Are they actually describing Democrats or Republicans? Are they describing, some aspect of something that doesn't have anything to do with what she's saying? Maybe it does, it's hard to tell with that quick little snippet.
I would say that they're presenting a long-term strategy. We're giving you information, we're making comparisons of things, but they are so selective in the information in which they have provided that it actually is an emotional strategy, that they might try to couch it from saying, it's a logic strategy. We're giving you what people have said, we're allowing you to take positions, we're helping you.
So yeah, characterize what you're saying, this, the idea that they're walking you along almost this ride or this journey of different snippets of info, different snippets of emotion, different things to draw on that, and the ways that's asking you or presenting in a way to get you to feel a certain way. And maybe even making the argument that they are presenting a coherent story. In a sense, they are. Just, it lacks some of the context, as Judy said, to really fully understand why those things are there.
Let us show you.
So as much as we're talking about strategy and this notion of the dopamine hit that, as Mike said, that you might get, or just whatever it is about how to wrap it up your emotions and drive you to think, well, I gotta find out what the next thing is. I gotta stay tuned in. If we flip to the other side of the page and think about Ten Commandments and, the meta narrative, the overarching story of who we are as God's children, who we are as disciples of Christ, who we are with our identity centered in Christ. When we watch a clip like this, kind of two questions. One, in the way that it's presented, how is it calling upon us or asking us to look at life differently than how God is calling us to live? And maybe secondly, just from that standpoint of the ways that then that might influence the ways that we have an opportunity, or how is this, maybe said differently, how is this clip helpful for us, even in the sense, as followers of Christ, to better recognize and understand where somebody we might meet is, and the opportunities that might open up to us to talk about who Jesus is. So let's go with the first one first, though, the idea of how is this clip presented in a way that's calling on us to live our lives and look at things differently than how God is calling us to live. Great.
Been raised in the church from my mom and remember the hymns of words were a thing not to do any kind of basis for our evangelism because it's so ingrained in us and it's so good that we just expect everybody to buy into it. And especially so say you're dealing with somebody that's a Muslim, you're in the same situation. You're butting him.
Yeah.
Whereas if you kind of step back and look at, maybe this is a little bit weird because faith is a little bit different than what we're doing with the belief. Because it is the issue of faith that you have to take some things to bring about based on what I believe God is putting in hearts. But we need to kind of have that background in our argument as to why we believe what we believe, and not just because we believe because this is what we're looking for.
So to quickly characterize for what Rick is saying, in part, if you're going out and you're in the situation where you have an opportunity to talk to somebody about Jesus that doesn't believe in Jesus, you mentioned Muslim, but it could be anybody, and for us that have been in the church for a really long time, maybe it seems like you're butting heads a little bit, try to figure out how to talk about it in a way that doesn't, to that person, just seem like you're just talking the pie in the sky, this ethereal God that's up there that doesn't really make sense. I just trust that he's there because I have faith in him, but I don't really make it tangible or real or visceral or in a way that's understandable to that person. We just talk about it. Well, I believe in Jesus because I know that he loves me and I know that he's done this. And it's all true. But how to actually say it in a way that really makes sense to them. Harlan. No, they absolutely don't. Harlan said they don't say anything about God being in control of the situation. Carol, yeah.
Truth and love. I think you should telling the truth in love, but you're telling it in Canada. And is it really a truthful view of everything that she's trying to say? So fast and furious. I just.
So Carol's bringing up the point of the eighth commandment, is the ways that God calls us to tell the truth. And especially telling the truth in love. And again, to characterize what you said, I mean, there very well may be a bunch of things that are in that clip that are true. You know, the clips that get taken out of context with people that were trying to present this information. They very well may all be true, but it's done so in a way to ratchet up the fear, to do other things that isn't about love. Judy.
I think you have to first allow the person to have their, and not attack them, but listen to them and listen to their opinion and establish some kind of relationship. They're not gonna talk to you if they're really trying to. Because they're listening to you.
So yeah, I think everybody here, Judy, she just talks about the importance of listening first to really understand where somebody's at and to do so in a way that give them space to talk about how to make sense of the world and not have them feel like they're coming, like you're judging them or you're attacking them because they don't understand who God is and they don't believe in Jesus, all these different kinds of things. I think for me, when I watch the flip, so much of it for me is again about emotional tragedy it's used and the way that it's either going to drive up fear or drive up the feelings of the dopamine, as Mike said, to make you feel better about making sense of the world. And the world's going to hell in a handbasket, as Carol said, but here's how to make sense of it. And whatever it is, you know, if we look at our small catechism, you know, fear, love, and trust in God above all things. And how much of this is causing or asking you or presenting information in a way to get you to fear Democrats or fear all the things that the Republicans might get taken away from them, or, you know, and even to just go back to sociological again for a minute, the propaganda model idea, common enemy is useless fear. You know, Chomsky talked about this in the sense of communism, how this was done in the 80s, certainly in years before that. You have this common enemy, communists are going to take over the country, and they're bad and everything else. You see the very similar kind of thing here. I mean, it's just all Democrats are bad, or maybe you don't feel that way, and then it makes you mad because then you think all Republicans are bad, or whatever it is. It's meant to drive up and get to see this person as an other that you don't really relate to, you don't really understand, you don't really have any commonality. Or keep the division between the people, absolutely, yeah, Brenda.
Satan has used the media so well to divide people. Then the distraction from the warning signs that
Brenda was just saying, I mean, the fact that you've got the devil at work in the world and using the media to divide us and get us to hate one another and not really have our minds focused on the fact that Jesus is coming back again. Go on.
You've taken a few really extremist views there. Some Democrats are trying to think the Democratic Party. So you can't trust any of it, all of that. Whereas the Democratic Party is probably just like the Republican Party, there are the extremist people, there are a lot more that are just more centric. And, you know, more recently, it's about you trying to think the whole group.
Yeah, Bond's basically just saying, painting all Democrats as if they're all the same, or maybe all Republicans as if they're all the same, but it's either us or them and that kind of thing. Tiffany, you have your hand up?
I think we can listen to some of those things and be like, okay, there's some people that like believe this, there's some people that are scared about this, like. Just honestly, like for me, I feel like I'm just gonna ignore this mostly and just like pray for these people, like just being seen to like God's eyes. I was really blessed growing up in a house with like a dad that was a Republican, a mom that was a Democrat, and taught like we are always respecting each other, like in our relationships, not because of our political views, but because of the people we are. And
There's lots of jokes about whether the votes just cancel each other out.
Yeah.
you're saying the parents, one Democrat, one Republican, just to see both sides of it, but, I think this too, when you think about just the first commandment, and fear, love, and trust. And both for us, just as we watch it, you know, to be cognizant of, is this calling upon me to fear, love, and trust in something other than God? But then, as we transition or pivot to the idea of someone that Judy said that you might get to listen to about where they're at, maybe this is somebody that's just sitting there looking like, yeah, the world is going on. How could there possibly be a loving God when you have all this brokenness, you have all this division, you have all these things going wrong in the world, whether it's, you know, fear about climate change, or whether it's a pandemic that we've had for the last, 2+ years, or you see that there's genocide going on in whatever country it is, or there's war in Ukraine right now, and they're looking at all these things, there's so many things to be afraid of, how can I possibly believe that this God that loves me? And whether that's maybe a moment where God can open up the door a little bit, because you know some of what's getting presented the way it's getting presented, because some of, maybe you're able to understand why is their headspace in the thoughts they're in, but maybe they're watching news feeds a lot, whatever station happens to be, Fox or CNN or MSNBC, whatever, they're just getting bombarded with all this stuff, ratcheting up their stress, ratcheting up their emotions, ratcheting up everything about why this world's such a broken place. And to give space for the fact to say, yeah, it is a broken place. World's hard sometimes. And I wish it wasn't that way. Kristen.
Even closer within the LCMS. You know, we had a national youth gathering with over 18,000 youth that were there, learning, drawing closer to Christ and talking about their faith in that. And yet so much of the stuff on social media coming out of it was an us versus them. How did they do worship? Did they talk about things the way they should have and all that? And we lose the focus on what really is the most important thing. Is it how we do worship? Is it how we build buildings? Is it how we do? Or is it just in sharing Christ's love to other people? Whether it's contemporary, whether it's traditional, whatever it may look like. You see it in our seminary. You know, are you a St. Louis or are you a Fort Wayne? And the ways that we try to draw those divisions, even within our own church body.
I think it's a really good point, and I think that sometimes we probably even see that within manifestations within our synod, where then the response is not a fear. If you don't do the divine service free, because it's not the old PLH one, if I remember right. If you don't do divine service free regularly, somehow you're not doing it the right way. You know, and so then maybe this fear that we're gonna lose the tradition, we're gonna lose hold of what it really means to be Lutheran. You know, all these things that we've had over the past 500+ years about what we know is best believed to be true and how we practice things and worship, how whatever it is. And then it is, are you with me that I'm right, or are you not? And rather finding commonality, or rather really digging in and just having conversations with each other, as Judy said, to listen, really listen to each other about where we're at, but it becomes a divisive thing that the devil could use and twist in our own minds, to twist within our own church body. And I mentioned before 8 o'clock, I'll mention this at 10:32, but we're 2 weeks out from the public kickoff on our capital campaign for the facility expansion, which is really exciting stuff. I mean, for those of us who've been here this whole time, we've been waiting to move forward on this project for a long time, and the architects are working on design plans right now. I don't know if those will be done in 2 weeks, but I think there'll at least be some drafts of some fun things to see, or some ideas they've got. And, you know, it's really exciting stuff, but then we really need to look at that and think, well, I don't know that I really wanted the sanctuary to look like this. The carpet's the wrong color, or the chairs aren't set up the right way, or, you know, whatever, the altar is in the wrong spot, all these different things. And it's not that they're not important. It's just how much do we actually talk and listen to each other and trust and say, is our fear, love, and trust in God above all things? Knowing that God is the one that's providing us the means right now to move forward with the facility expansion. So we're trusting, looking and asking Him, help us to see how your Spirit leads us, help us to see how we might use this in building for your purpose. To reach those who don't yet know Jesus. All right.
Along that line, sometimes, think about, I looked at the, income from the last week. We need $32,000. We took in 15. Now, that scares the world out of it, and you think, well, what are we going to do
how are we gonna possibly change that? Well, we got to back off away from that thought to say, well, there's no way to win. And if God is doing it, God is the one who can decide what.
Absolutely. And always will bring it up, even if we go to a capital campaign, we need to continue to support ministries here, the ministries we already have, and how we do that through our operating tithes. And the tendency is looking, as you mentioned last week, was a low operating rate. Does that then cause you to have fear in your mind? Well, are we really gonna have enough? And I was like thinking of El Shaddai, the Almighty God, El Shaddai is Hebrew, El Shaddai, and one of the translations I remember reading is, this idea that, this is the Almighty God that provides for you, that's always there for you, but El Shaddai being the God who loves you enough. He always gives you enough, every single time. There's never a moment, there's never a second where he doesn't give you exactly what you need. It may not feel like it's as much as what you wanted, it may not feel like it's as much as what you needed, but God's always there providing for you. All right, let's see how it ends. We're gonna quit 2 minutes early today, but before we quit, next week will be the last week of this class. We're gonna kind of do a recap of a bunch of different things that we've gone through. 2 weeks from today will be again the kickoff of the capital campaign. We're talking about having some kind of devotional Bible study stuff in here during this time, but I'm actually gonna, I think gonna be doing some things where there's gonna be informational booklets about the campaign, things that you can get, so you can really kind of see and understand where we're at, how we're moving forward with all that. I think that we're gonna do that in here during this time. So look for more information on that. Again, that's 2 weeks out. So thanks again, everybody, for today. We'll see you next week.